I represent neuroscience camp at this conference. Over 40 years, my empirical work was in neuroscience of learning and memory. In the beginning of 80s, we identified genes that are involved in establishment of long-term memory. They became known as immediate early genes. We found that they are necessary for formation of long-term memory. And since they are ubiquitously expressed during various forms of learning, we designed different approaches to use these genes to map the engram circuits, memory circuits in the brain, using molecular biology tools, optical imaging, whole brain mapping, brain atlases, etc. But with all these approaches, you finally approach the question, and where is me in the brain, and actually what is me? And focusing on this question, I started developing a theory which is called the neural hypernetwork theory, Cognitome. I started doing this about 10 years ago. Gerald Edelman once told me that in his experience to shape a theory like that takes 15 years. So there is still 5 years in the future, but I will briefly present an outline, oversimplified outline of this framework approach. In this, I will build on 3 yesterday talks of Anil Seth, of Stuart Hameroff, and Nicholas Humphrey. Taking the message of Anil Seth, which is also the question of being you, I will propose that the theory which we are developing makes a shift from focus on consciousness to focus on mind, which is shift from process to structure. I will explain it in a few moments. The second shift which I would like to take is to pick up the message of Stuart that neuroscience needs a revolution. But while Stuart goes deeper at the bottom for this revolution, I'm using this phrase of Richard Feynman to tell that there is plenty of room at the top and going up. So the second shift from the current neuroscience thinking is shift from micro to macro. And finally, Nicholas' talk on evolving sentience, which I think is a very important point for understanding of consciousness. I will modify it, saying that what is important and what the theory of Cognitome addresses, it focuses not on phylogeny, but more on ontogeny. That is, shift from evolutionary to developmental emergence of mind and consciousness. So, summing up these 3 premises, the theory proposes that consciousness is not the right entering point for the science of consciousness. Mind is a proper one. The addressing the question of mind has to be first comparable to addressing directly the question of consciousness. Second, that the brain at its maximal existence, that is cause-effect potential, should be understood not as a physiological neural network, connectome, but cognitive neural hypernetwork, cognitome. And the third one, that mind and consciousness originate not through evolution per se, but through rather evolution of individual development and learning. And this is the place where these structures and processes originate. So I will explain in more details all these three premises. The first one is that consciousness, according to the theory, is a specific process, while mind is a specific structure. And if there is no such structure, there is no such process in this structure. I will use a metaphor to explain this idea. We can identify mind with organic structure, like, for example, the sun. And then consciousness is a process in this structure. So we need this structure for this process to take place. And viewing the mind as a structure has a number of advantages. For example, we can start asking questions. What is the nature of this structure? How is it built? And how did it originate? Furthermore, we can start asking the question, how can we map this kind of structure? And finally, we can start studying processes that are specific only to this structure, like mental processes, including consciousness. Shift number one, from micro to macro. To understand this structure, we have to move from studying the brain at its physiological level to studying it at its cognitive level of organization, which is, according to the theory, not a neural network, but a neural hypernetwork. So in this diagram, we have the brain composed of cogs. But what exactly are these cogs, and how can we formalize and understand this complex structure comparable to known approaches in the network neuroscience? Theory suggests that each cognitome, neural hypernetwork, consists of two types of elements, vertices and edges. Vertices are called cogs or cognitive groups. The term cog has a double meaning in the theory. In English, it is a subordinate but integral part of the whole system, and in the theory, it is also a unit of qualitatively specific experience carried by these groups of elements, of neurons. So it is a separate element in the mental system. These cooperative groups of neurons, which are distributed and sparse in the nervous system and formed during development and learning, are starting to encode the relations of the organism with its outer and later on inner environment. So they become cognitively specialized. In terms of cause-effect power, that means that activation of this group of elements means that at the previous moment, the distribution of probabilities in the environment was not uniform, but was corresponding to a particular aspect of the relation of organism to the environment. And activity of this group of elements means that the future of the relations of organism with the environment will be also not uniform in probability, but will change according to the effect power of this group of elements. In this sense, it is information in and information out, or since it is stored as a group of elements in memory, it is a knowledge of organism, the element of the knowledge of organisms. Cogs have different size. They are of different forms. There is a whole zoo of such cognitive groups. In details, I cannot go into details of this classification, but an important part of the hypernetwork is that these groups are linked by relations, and the relations are not the same like in networks, like in neural networks. The link between two cognitive elements is not the connection of axons of one group of neurons to another group of neurons. The link is the neural elements themselves, overlapping elements which belong to the first cognitive group and the second cognitive group, which means that this element becomes neuron specialized in the cog number 1, and if it is being activated, it can potentiate the retrieval from memory of cog number 2 or 3, depending on the number of other groups to which this common unit with a superposition belongs. So cogs and logs. And briefly, the theory says that such cognitive system consists, therefore, of cognitively specialized elements. Elements which, within the organism, being a part of organism, encode the knowledge of the whole organism, the particular aspect of knowledge of the whole organism about the environment, first outside, and second with the internalization of inner environment. These elements are concentrated in the central nervous system, and they form a cognitive organ of the body, its cognitome. It has specific structure and cause-effect power, which can be mathematically, and I cannot go into details here, approximated by the mathematical concept of hypernetworks. So the mind, according to theory, in most useful understanding of its term, is organic structure, which is identical to this higher order hypernetwork of the brain and its specific causal properties. Whenever the brain or nervous system develops such hypernetwork, it constitutes the maximal level of existence of the brain and the organism. So simplifying it into 3 questions, we can say that to the question, what is the brain, it can be said that it can be described as is done today by the network theory as a neural network. But the mind at the level n+1 can be also described as a network, cognitive network. And the mind-body relation, a relation of n to n+1 according to the theory, can be described as a cognitive hypernetwork of the physiological brain network. I would stress once more that according to this approach, mind is a neural network organized into hypernetwork. So it is not a virtual system, it is an organic structure being built by development and experience and learning. We were not able in neuroscience to visualize and study this type of structures because they consist of clouds of neurons which are distributed and active only during performance of particular behaviors. So there were no sufficient tools until recently to identify these groups of neurons, to study how they appear during experience and how they shape the behavior of the organism. But these tools are appearing now. The theory in its development consists of 3 stages or 3 parts. Conceptual model, which I described a little bit. formal model, which is a mathematical description of neural hypernetworks, and neurobiological model, which brings these principles to neural mechanisms of formation of this hypernetwork. Now I move to the third shift from phylogeny to ontogeny, or from evolutionary emergence to developmental emergence, where mind and consciousness originate during individual development. In a sense, this is the way to approach the vital question, what is me or who are we, in the ontogenetic timescale. This is the famous painting of Gauguin, which addresses the questions, where do we come from, what are we, and where are we going? And Gauguin explained that to read this painting, it is necessary to look from right to left, from the group of women giving birth to a child, to various functional activities of adult people, and finally to that old gray woman sitting with the deep thoughts where we are going. So the neural hypernetwork theory addresses this question also in this line of dynamics. It asks what is necessary, minimal and sufficient for the Darwinian organism to develop mind in ontogenetic development. We know that this type of development reproducibly occurs to all the organisms which bear mind, and comparable to evolutionary approach or evolutionary question, it is much easier also to study this emergence experimentally in the development, behavior, learning, and memory. So the theory suggests that three simple basic biological principles are necessary and sufficient for the system to build the mind. Why biologically? Because none of these principles involves any cognitive or mental terms. That means that these are ground principles of biological system which does not possess at the moment any cognitive properties. These principles are generative functional systems, deep integrative network, and cellular associative memory. To explain a little bit the first and the major principle of generative functional systems, and also to go back to the higher order mind-brain identity thesis, which was proposed by the theory. I have to return to some of the historical development which is the background for this theory. The approaches which were taken in the Russian neuroscience over the last century and a half in the search of the neural basis of the mind. Ivan Pavlov was, of course, with his conditioned reflexes, looking for the physiological basis of mental activity. The question he posed at the beginning of his study of conditioned reflexes: how does the matter of the brain give rise to subjective phenomena? His solution to this was a direct mind-brain identity. He believed and stressed many times that the association as known in psychology is a fundamental case which can be identified with the principle of cells that fire together, wire together, which was popularized later by Hebb, by temporal connections between different parts of the central nervous system representing conditioned stimulus and unconditioned stimulus. So that was the idea of direct mind-brain identity. It was held also by a number of other Russian neuroscientists who studied this question at the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th century. But something interesting and important happened in 1920s when Marxism came to Russia in a form of historical and dialectical materialism. In the middle of 1920s, two young scientists in Russia took this idea of emergence in historical and dialectical sense to the study of the mind-brain problem and understanding of the social nature of the mind. That were Lev Vygotsky with his work, The Historical Meaning of Psychological Crisis, and Peter Anokhin with his work, Dialectical Materialism and the Problem of Mind. So what was developed then as a functional system theory in the work of School of P.K. Anokhin can be described in a nutshell, avoiding the terms of materialism as a deep macro-realism, which I suggest as a coincides principle of functional systems theory. It suggests that the macro level is different from micro level because it has different specific structural and organizational properties, which can be studied scientifically and understood experimentally. Macro level is real because it has its own cause-effect powers different from micro level and its cause-effect power. The third point is most important. It is not present in the classical British emergentism, for example, but was present in dialectical materialism approach. That macro level is deep because micro level in macro systems is transformed and carries these macro properties. That means that the macro properties are not overlaid over the existing micro properties, but the whole system from top to down is being transformed according to the new structural level of organization. What it means for neurobiological mechanisms, that Leibniz-Mill argument, which was suggested him as a criticism of mechanical materialism, the famous idea that if we will imagine the brain as a large mill and enter into it, we will see different moving parts in this mill, but by examining its interior, we find only such mechanical parts and never anything by which to explain a perception or any mental properties. Studies in the School of Functional Systems in 1970s, 80s showed that experimentally in animals which learn new tasks in a complex environment, the activity of neurons in the waking brain is become specialized in relation to certain functional systems, behavioral functional systems that they perform. That means the elements of subjective experience, of experience which they acquire in the experimental situation. Neurons of many brain structures was shown are simultaneously involved in such functional systems being synchronized. And in the waking brain, neurons exhibit anticipatory activity. determined not by stimuli, but by goals and intentions which are retrieved from memory. So as an example, for example, here the neuron showed with in rabbit which learned to either to pull the trigger or to press the pedal to obtain food. Different neurons in the brain can be specialized either to performance of this behavior on the left and right side with the two levers or two rings, or only by doing pressing the pedal or pulling the ring, or any combination of these. So these are elements of new experience, rings, pedals, which never existed in the experience of animals, and the neurons are being specialized in sessions of learning to this. We are studying this specialization now using different optical recording methods, and find, for example, that this specialization occurs very rapidly upon the entrance of the animal into the new conditions from nearly the first trial being stabilized later on. So what is suggested in the theory of neural hypernetworks is that if we will take the rules of natural selection working in the organism without nervous system, they can be viewed as algorithm, where combination of independent principles of 1, 2, and 3 being present together and extended by the cumulative effects of genetic memory, though being very simple in hundreds of millions of years, can give a surprising structural complexity and diversity. To append it with the rules of learning and memory in the developing organism, which are simple enough and each of them is not containing any cognitive principle, can give the similar algorithm which works ontogenetically, and due to the long-term memory in the nervous system, can build a neural hypernetwork over the existing neural network, supplying the organism with the individual and complex cognitive properties. So addressing both the question of the complex design of the mind and diversity of individual minds or minds of individual species, depending on the experience they have in the nature. So, final question, what is consciousness in this framework? Theory suggests that it is a global percolation, the process of penetration of activity of a cognitive group through the cognitome reaching access to the rest of the cognitive groups or cognitome as a whole, or me or self. This is a work in progress, and thank you for your attention.